Get smart with your spending with Nucenda's Breeze debit card. We've got your back by offering safe and easy access to your money. Never any hidden fees, just an account that makes sense. Download the Nucenda app to enroll in mobile and internet banking, managing your funds, making person-to-person transfers, and rounding up purchases to save. Visit Nucenda.org to explore Breeze accounts and join our credit union.
New members must be eligible for membership. Equal opportunity lender. Insured by NCUA.
Good day, folks, and welcome to another episode of Inside Santa Fe Public Schools podcast. I am Joe Abeta, and we have a special guest today. Our guest is Daniel Pastrana, our bilingual education coach. But before we get to him, we'd like to thank our sponsors. Our title sponsor, the Nucenda Credit Union. I want to thank them for supporting the Inside Santa Fe Public Schools podcast. So thank you so much, and let's get to our guest. Our guest, Daniel Pastrana. Daniel, how you doing, Daniel?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And it was interesting. So we had on Friday, this past week, we had the New Highlands University president came to visit us. So we had a reception for him over here. And the superintendent was going around and doing little fun facts about each of us when we were getting up, saying what we did, introducing ourselves. And he mentioned something that was really interesting about the way you got, would you say, recruited or brought back to the public schools?
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure thing. So I moved to New Mexico in 2021 and was fortunate to land a job in the language and culture department as a bilingual coach. And then, as luck would have it, got offered an opportunity to work after that first year for an organization called TNTP, an educational nonprofit. And I'd spent the past 21 years or so working in public education in the public school systems. So it was a big departure, but I thought, okay, this is something I want to give a try. And right around the year mark, I was thinking it sure would make sense to get back to the district. This has been great and I've learned a lot, but I want to apply it all. And lo and behold, I get a phone call as I'm driving in mid-July from
unsolicited, right?
Unsolicited.
Like you had not applied for a job or
anything.
Okay.
Correct. And I was driving with my family from Santa Fe to Santa Barbara, California for a family road trip. And we were in the middle of the Mojave Desert and we had been camping out. And I get a phone call from Vanessa Romero, deputy superintendent, and the cell phone service was really, really choppy. And so, I let her know I would love to chat, but let's wait till I get in cell service. And so I remember very clearly making it to the coast to Ventura, California. And Vanessa and I set up a Google Meet, and the rest is history.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. It's pretty cool, though, right? When you get reached out, it's kind of like manna from the sky when something like this comes out, right?
It was, and I said it then, and I remain saying the same thing and feel the same way. It is such an honor and such a deep responsibility, and I'm really thankful and really appreciative to be trusted with this role because it's so important.
Yeah. So, Danielle, did you grow up here in Santa Fe?
Good question. So I actually, I'm the child of two immigrants from Ecuador and Colombia, but I was born here in the States, but grew up primarily in Connecticut on the East Coast. Right around when I was 25, I moved to California, and the big impetus was I decided I'm going to be a teacher, and I didn't just want to be any teacher. I wanted to teach in a bilingual program because my schooling from kindergarten through university really didn't reflect language and culture that I had at home. I was schooled completely in English and only spoke Spanish at home. It was actually kind of, not unlike a lot of students' experiences, kind of wanted to hide the fact that I had a different language and culture than the majority of kids in my school. And as someone who could pass as ethnically ambiguous, let's say, it wasn't very evident unless you came over to my house or unless you met my parents. And heard their accent. And so at first, it was something kind of that I hid. And then the older I got, into early adolescence and certainly into my early 20s, I was like, wait a second, this is actually such an incredibly valuable piece of not only who I am, but what I can offer to the world. And I want to give the opposite experience that I had to kids. So I moved to Oakland, California, where I became a teacher, taught in a dual language program Over there, it was its second year in existence, and within the third year, we were a nationally Title I recognized school. So what that means is that there was, I think, 17 schools nationwide that got this recognition, and only 2 schools in California. And it was for academic achievement for students with low socioeconomic background, a lot of whom happened to be students who were learning English as a second language. And so that showed me really early on that, number one, our students absolutely can, and our students are incredible and resilient, and that we can, as educators, accomplish really difficult things if we put our minds to it. And then mid-pandemic, our family had our second child, and we were living in a very small apartment in Oakland and pretty much priced out of anywhere else. And so we made the big decision to make a big move. We wanted a big change, had a couple connections family-wise to Santa Fe, made a couple trips out in the year of 2020, and then May of 2021, we packed all our belongings and our cat in a car, made our way out here, and have been here ever since, and plan to be here for a very long time.
That's awesome. I want to go back though. You know, you were raised in Connecticut, right? And it's interesting because there were some similarities. I grew up here in Santa Fe, and we didn't speak Spanish.
Yeah.
You know, and it was Spanish class was a requirement back in the day. Santa Fe High grad.
Yep.
You know, Spanish 1, Spanish 2, and I struggled.
Yeah.
Really struggled. And it was because, and my dad, had a master's in Spanish literature, spoke Spanish fluently. She was from Santa Fe. My mom, she understood it, but she spoke it a little bit, not too much.
Sure.
And then we never spoke it. Yeah. And so it was really truly a fresh new language to me.
Yeah.
Knowing some slang here and there, growing up, in the neighborhood slang and stuff, but not knowing formally, how to speak it. And I always felt like, and I never did. I never have. It's interesting because, it was never really pressed on us to know it. And as you get older, you appreciate it more. I married a woman, a girl from San Diego, California, roots Rosarito. Her mom's from Casas Grandes in Chihuahua. Dad's from TJ, and she spoke Spanish. And one of her things I had going was a strike against me. When I asked her, "What are you looking for in a guy, just to date her?" She said, "Well, he needs to speak Spanish. He can't be in the Navy," which I was, and he can't have a hairy chest. So I had everything going against me, 3 strikes. But the thing is that getting, fast forward, we got married and stuff. My son speaks very good Spanish.
Awesome.
Took it in college too. Loved the language. Speaks it now. Is dating a girl from Tennessee who is fluent in Spanish.
Awesome.
Interesting.
Awesome.
But the way that it could just
generationally,
and I appreciate the fact that they did learn it and they did embrace the language and stuff. And so, but here in the culture wise here in Santa Fe, growing up in the 90s and in the 80s here, it wasn't there was some cultural stuff that was definitely, that's still today that's here.
Present, yeah.
But the language formally wasn't really pressed on people and that's why I find these programs that you are now in charge of this is really cool. I wish this was something we had in the curriculum when we were going to school here.
Well, that's super encouraging to hear because, like you mentioned, and for many reasons across the country, this happens here in Santa Fe. There are several generations that had their language, their Spanish specifically, taken away. Like kids were, kids who are now parents and grandparents were actually, they were told not to, or they were specifically got in trouble for speaking Spanish
because of statehood, right? Because of the whole statehood thing. When the feds came, you cannot speak Spanish. You got to show that we are American.
That's right.
As apple pie in the East Coast, right?
And so I'm excited to say a new version of being American as apple pie is being multilingual. Because I recognize, who we are as a people, and I'd say multilingual because our country really is multilingual. So I'm excited to see this rebirth, or as we're calling it here in Santa Fe, a renaissance around bilingual education.
So with that, let me ask this question now that we're at it: is why is it important for bilingual education here in our community?
Absolutely. So I'm so excited to see bilingual education grow and thrive here in Santa Fe specifically, but it really is something that benefits everyone everywhere. It's a way to connect with people across languages, across cultures. It builds empathy. It builds understanding. To be able to be in a place where you are a learner of a language and you have to kind of be humble and depend on your peers, depend on your teacher to help you, I think it's a fantastic way of building character, and at the same time to be an example for your peers when you're the one in the dominant language is also really helpful. So it teaches you to work with other people. There's so many benefits that have been shown scientifically of how your brain actually changes. You have less likelihood of Alzheimer's disease. You have better ability to shift between tasks and cognitive demands. You are able to organize in a different way because your brain is literally switching in and out consistently between both languages. And I think it's just so great to here in Santa Fe, we have such a deep connection, obviously, to the Spanish language. And so whether you're learning Spanish or another language, to be able to really connect with folks and connect with the culture and heritage of Santa Fe, I think it's something really special. And I'm so proud that we're able to offer it here in Santa Fe.
Is there 5, and I could be wrong, 5 immersion programs, right, that they start from kindergarten and then they work all the way through, as long as they're there? I know that there's some K-8s in there too as well. So they're there from kindergarten through 8th grade learning Spanish. But so I guess one thing is for people that don't know what immersion is, can you explain that? And then we'll get to the other questions.
Sure. No,
what is it first?
This is a great question. And as a district, I think this is something that we're working on doing a better job is educating the community at large as to what their options are. So I'm super appreciative of this opportunity and encourage folks who are listening to absolutely reach out and contact the Language and Culture Department after my explanation if you have any further questions. But we have a couple different state-approved bilingual multicultural educational programs, aka BMEPs, that are here in the district. The first one is our dual language programming. And the dual language program has three main goals, really. The first one is to grow students who are bilingual and biliterate. So that means you can read, write, speak, and listen in Spanish and in English. The second goal is to have a grade level academic achievement, whether that's in English, whether you're learning social studies in English and math in Spanish and language arts in both. The goal is to have a student who is having academic success. And the third one is to have socio-cultural competence. That's kind of what I was mentioning before, where you really have to build your ability to connect with other people and have that understanding of how language and culture bring us together, despite sometimes making us different. But there's a lot more that we have in common. And so our dual language programs that we have right now are El Camino Real, which is a kindergarten through 8th grade school, and they have what's called an 80-20 program, which means that they start the kindergarten year, 80% in Spanish, 20% in English. In the first grade year, that shifts to 70% Spanish, 30% English. Second grade, 60-40, and by third grade, it's 50-50. So they're learning half their content and day in each language.
Okay. So if someone that's totally a kindergartner that has not spoken a word of Spanish, maybe sí and por favor, that's it, very basic.
Yep.
They're going in. What's the learning curve on this?
Great question. Yeah. And so a misconception is that our dual language programs or our bilingual programs are just for Spanish speaking students. And that is definitely not true. Anyone can join any of the programs I'll talk about. And like you mentioned, there is a learning curve. So it starts with what's called a silent period, where students are really just kind of like, what's going on? I can pick up certain words, or I can get the context of what you're doing because everyone else is doing it with me. That can last anywhere from, a few weeks to a few months. But students, if they're silent, doesn't mean they're not learning. They're picking up language left and right. It's most folks will relate to this, that you're able to understand language a lot easier than you're able to speak it when you're learning a new language. The speaking comes next. And so that's when the production phase begins. And by the end of a year, a student who's never spoken Spanish or English for that matter and is in a dual immersion program is absolutely speaking and putting pieces together. Sometimes they're using their whole linguistic repertoire and using some English and some Spanish to communicate, but it's happening, and then that just continues to grow. So and it works. You were saying it's 80-20. So let's say for the English speakers,
they're in the shoes of the 80% of the other classmates that speak Spanish only, right?
Yep.
Primarily Spanish speaking, and then it switches.
That's right.
And they're able to help each other out.
That's right. And that's a key piece, is that you really are, and no matter what the program is, you're a learner part of the day, and then you're a language model or expert the other part of the day. And I think that builds a lot of character for kids at a young age to know that, hey, I'm going to depend on you, Joe, when I'm speaking Spanish, and then you're going to depend on me when I'm speaking English, but we're going to help each other. We're going to find a way to help each other. So.
Do you find, is there a waiting list to get into these programs? It seems like there would be.
So there often can be. It really depends on the year and the number of seats available. But another important thing for families to know in the city is that if you're interested in dual language, and I'll go through the other schools because I just mentioned one, there's many options, and we have what's called a lottery window coming up in January, where you can choose a school that's outside of your zone. And so you can list preferences like, this is my first choice, this is my second, and I'll go over the other schools in a moment, so you can actually think, okay, if I can't get into this school, what are my other options? So
yeah, because it seems like what an opportunity.
I agree.
Right. Have you seen? I don't know. Have you seen, or is there any kind of historic data that shows that maybe it didn't start out right away, or has it always been a high attended or choice for people to get into these programs? Have they always been in demand, or did it just start? Or
good question. So dual language programs have been in existence since like early to mid 70s, but really started to grow in popularity in the United States in the 90s, and then you see a big boom in the past 20 years. But I would still argue that people are getting to know that this is an option, because again, you often hear, oh, it's a bilingual program. That means it's only if you have a Spanish-speaking background that you can go to. So we really want to get the word out that it's for everyone, and everyone benefits when we have what's called a two-way model, where there's equal amounts of Spanish speakers as there are English speakers, and then there's students who kind of fall in between the two, because that way you've got language models for each other that can really support each other.
Gotcha. All right, so let's go for time purposes. Also, I want to make sure we include everybody because
please. So I mentioned 80-20 program for El Camino. We also have an 80-20 program currently at Cesar Chavez Elementary. That's a K-5, and at Sweeney Elementary, that's a K-5 as well. Those are 80-20 programs. At Salazar and at Ramirez Thomas, we are having a 50-50 program. So students start in kindergarten already half their day English, half their day Spanish, and continue that way through 5th or 6th grade, depending on where the school stops. Both programs have been shown to work equally as well when they're supported and well set up. And then, so those are our elementary dual language programs. I'm just going to say them one more time in case I missed one. We got El Camino and Cesar Chavez as 80-20, Sweeney as 80-20, and then we have Salazar and Ramirez Thomas at 50-50.
So let me ask you, why 50-50? Why can't they all be 80-20? Is there?
It's a great question.
Why were those created?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's different philosophies on how language is best learned. Some folks feel that if the majority of the students are coming from a Spanish-speaking background, well, then let's capitalize on their linguistic skills in Spanish and start literacy in Spanish first, and then we can transfer over. But really, the research has shown that both of them can be effective. And it's an internal question that we're always debating here at SFPS is which way do we want to go? But I think it's actually kind of nice to have both.
It's good to have some choice. Right?
There it is.
There you go. Okay. All right, so we got 80-20, we got 50-50.
Yep, what else? So I would be remiss not to mention Kearney Elementary, who has a slightly different model, but really important, again, back to parent choice. It's called the Heritage Language Model, and this is meant to serve our students who are English learners, and what it is they receive an hour of English language development as well as an hour of Spanish language arts every day. But the goal with the Heritage Model is more to focus on speaking and comprehension. So you're going to have, because it's only an hour of Spanish a day, less opportunity to build out those other skills of reading and writing. And again, the purpose of this is kind of to connect more with like, hey, I have, kind of like you mentioned, I've got my grandmother who speaks Spanish and my parents didn't get a chance to develop it, but I want to still connect with my grandmother and have that opportunity to have that heritage connection. So that's available at Kearney Elementary. And then moving on to our secondary, we have at Ortiz Middle School, we have a dual language program there. So let's say you go to Ramirez Thomas for your first 5 years of elementary school, or 6 really, kindergarten through 5th grade, and then you can continue on, continuing to learn content and language at Ortiz, which is really awesome. And then moving on to our high schools, I'm forgetting one, middle school, we have also a heritage model at Milagro. Again, say you're at Kearney or just jumping in and really want to continue to build on that Spanish, that can happen at Milagro. In our secondary schools, our high schools, we have Santa Fe High and Capital, who also offer a heritage model program as well. So right now we have a pathway from kindergarten through 8th grade for our dual language, and then you can continue on in heritage in high school. But our goal is to really build out a pathway from pre-K or early childhood all the way through 12th grade, so folks can have that opportunity. And then the kind of the prize at the end of the journey is graduating with a bilingual seal on your diploma, which shows that you are able to not just read, write, speak, and listen in one language, but in 2, and that you've passed certain requirements in a test, and as well as some presentations orally and different criteria in order to demonstrate that you're bilingual.
Do you know, as far as how many kids have completed that journey and taken realized that and to graduate with that?
So I may get these numbers slightly off.
That's fine. We'll cut you some slack here. Okay.
But the real expert is Dr. Suzanne Hawkes Gorman, who is one of the folks that works with that I get to work with in our department, and she's been really the lead on our bilingual seal, which I believe is in its 4th year. And we started with very few students the first year. We've grown it from, I want to say, like 20 or 30 that graduated to over 150 last year. And
wow, that's really good.
And that's only growing. And it's not just students who are fluent in English and Spanish, but we've had students who have gotten the bilingual seal for American Sign Language, for Russian, for there's so I want to say there's 8 or 9 different languages that we've been awarded the seal in. And we're super excited that now we're kind of bringing it down. So our middle schoolers have the opportunity to earn what's called a Middle School Bilingual Seal Pathway Award that shows that they're on their way. And it's a way of practicing and getting ready for that. And we have all the students at Ortiz and El Camino participating this year, like every single one. And so that's going to just up our numbers even more. So super excited about that.
So have there been, and I'm sorry for this, but I just want to know, as far as, so when did this program start, the 80-20, the 50-50? When did it start in the public schools? Do you know that?
Great question. So this also outdates me by quite a bit, but we have had for decades now some kind of bilingual programming. The dual immersion specifically, we began to see, I would say, in the past 15 years.
Okay, so there's been plenty of students that have gone through this and have graduated.
And I will say one of the leading schools in terms of moving towards dual language was El Camino. They started out in Agua Fria and then started the school El Camino, and they're the only K-8 dual language only. Every other school that I've mentioned has both a bilingual strand as well as an English-only strand. So back to parent choice. Hey, I'm zoned for Sweeney. I get to decide, do I want my child to be in dual language or do I want them to be in English only, for example, which I think, again, is important for parents to have that opportunity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I know that you mentioned Ms. Hawkes, you guys also had something going on during the summertime that taught.
We did.
That continued on with teaching all 3, right? You taught about cultural and also language as well, correct?
Yeah, we had 2 really exciting summer programs that we've been able to offer for the past 3 years now. The first one was what you just mentioned, our Spanish immersion camp, which is called Spanish Splash, where anyone, regardless of whether you're in bilingual education or not, can come in. And we did K6 or possibly, I think it was K6. And it was exactly that. It was an immersion into, hence the splash, because you're being immersed.
Yes.
Immersion into Spanish with an opportunity to learn around the heritage and culture around Santa Fe. So we talked about acequias, we talked about so many different things, and that was a huge success. That's grown exponentially over the past couple of years. We also ran a camp for newcomers. So a newcomer is a student who's recently arrived to the country. an immigrant student. So anywhere from 0 to 3 years. And as you guys can imagine, there's a lot of challenges because you're learning, whether you're entering at kindergarten or whether you're entering in 10th grade, there's a lot to learn about the culture of the U.S., the language, and then of course all the content that comes along with it. And it's a different situation for a young student versus a student who's entering the country, let's say in, like I mentioned, 10th grade. But we ran a program just for newcomers to really build language and also just get our heads wrapped around, U.S. school system and what it all is. So that is another one of our pride and joys. And we are now in our third year. And that has also been really successful.
That's pretty amazing that we're doing that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And it comes at no cost if to Santa Fe Public School students. Right. It's free.
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely. And we plan on offering both again next year. So
I was going to ask you that. So was there a waiting list to get into this program for the summertime?
There was on both ends. We were tight on space. It's dictated by funding, but I'm going to misquote the numbers here, but let's say we had around 60-ish spots for each one. Again, it could be give or take 10 if memory serves me correctly. But we did have a waiting list, and it was in high demand. And that makes me really happy because they're both really needed for very different reasons. But we're excited to offer them again this summer. So once again, keep your eye out. Language and Culture Department has a Facebook page. You can always call our office, and we'll give information. Usually we start announcing those offerings come March, April.
Awesome. Daniel Pastrana is joining us, folks, bilingual education coach. Is it still bilingual education coach, or did you get moved?
I have been
promoted. It sounds like you've gone up a bump here on this, brother. They don't just call a coach out in the middle of the Mojave Desert, right? They need to change that on your title.
I will say I was a coach. I'm now the executive director of the department.
So you're the executive director.
That's
so
correct.
I apologize.
That is okay. That is okay. And as I mentioned before, so honored to have this responsibility and task of overseeing and supporting all of our students and teachers and principals and families. So,
no, that's awesome. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
For the podcast, you started out as a coach, and now you're an executive director, so that's good. I apologize.
I'll take it.
I should have asked. I apologize.
It's all good.
So what would be? Let's look. What are you hoping for in the next? If you were to look at this program, what are you looking at? 3 years, 4 years, 5 years from now? What are you hoping?
Great question. So let me back up before I go forward.
Okay.
This past January, the board passed a resolution for what we're calling a bilingual renaissance. And I think that really set the tone for the work because that happened in my first year in this role. So I'm now in my second year. A bilingual renaissance to not just strengthen our programs, because I'll be honest, we do need to work on strengthening our programs, but to also show that this is something that can and should be available to everyone. So long term, and let's call it medium term, in the next 5 years, what I'd like to see is our bilingual programs have been working so hard, and I really give a massive shout out to our teachers and to our leaders to really understanding how to teach literacy across 2 languages. So we've invested a lot of money and time into understanding we have these priority standards as a district. How do we consistently and equitably teach both languages and teach the standards at the same time? So I won't get into all the technical bits, but we're really excited to have a lot of professional development since the beginning of the summer through now on how to do that. So that's the strengthening piece, and I hope that we continue to build as a community of educators to do that. And to me, one of the things that retains and helps retain teachers and really make us feel like a strong community is strong professional development, and we pride ourselves as a department in providing that. We had our first will be an annual conference for bilingual or multilingual educators that really brought us all together and brought some high quality PD that was led by both folks outside of the district and our own teachers, which was really cool to see. So I want to continue that, really continue to get the word out as a community, what the benefits of bilingual education are, and continue to attract families from across the city to our schools. There's many studies, one in particular that always gets cited by Thomas and Collier, that shows that when a bilingual program is well-staffed, well-articulated, well-supported, they can and will outperform monolingual schools, or at least perform at the same level.
Yeah.
And so that is absolutely something we're headed to, because I want to show everyone the benefits of that, both academically and socially, and really just continue to retain and hold our own staff here. This is one of the first years that we were able to sponsor visas for some of our teachers that were here visiting from Mexico and Spain, because we do depend on our staffing to have some teachers who come from overseas, and we were able to renew visas for 13 of those teachers, which means that they're going to be here for another 3 to 6 years, which is fantastic, because we know that teachers who invest in the community thrive, and so do their students. And so continue to build our community, continue to build the teaching staff, the families, the students, and really show that this is a renaissance, that we're doing this together, and that we're graduating students who are academically successful and are being able to speak and listen and read and write in 2 languages.
Yeah, and and also getting that worldly, bringing teachers in from around the world is pretty amazing,
it's
right?
Pretty cool.
Because you get a different perspective.
That's right.
Right, and it maybe invokes these students that when they get older they can go and travel.
That's right.
Study abroad and be
That's
able
right.
to communicate in another language, not just English. They can, because you go to Italy. I know in Spain they speak Spanish, but they also speak it in Italy, and they speak it in, all
So
over
many different
throughout
countries,
Europe. Yeah, so it's just a good thing to have that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just reminded me of one more point that I wanted to share, which is that we hope to also grow our own. We hope that our students who are graduating with the bilingual seal, who are graduating after, over a decade plus of having this model of education, that they go out into the world and do wonderful and important things. One of which could be come back and teach in Santa Fe Public Schools, because we need you and want you. And we have a couple teachers. I want to shout out a few at Ramirez Thomas, all over the school system, who were students who went through the Santa Fe Public Schools and have come back and are now working as bilingual teachers, which I think is so, so powerful, because it really is, they're amazing models for our students. So.
Well, and here's one thing I think that's very important is that, going to school here and having those students and ESL students, what they call English as a second language students, and you really couldn't communicate with them, right? Because they were, like you said, they came, they maybe had been here 2-3 weeks. They didn't know culturally what was going on here school-wise, and also being able to communicate with the mainstream student body, right? Because there was this language barrier. But now that's getting rid of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's a beautiful thing.
I couldn't agree more.
Nothing more welcoming than someone talking to you in your language on the first day of school, asking you what your name is, how are you doing, and bringing you in and making you feel comfortable, right?
It's a
warm
awesome
hug, right?
It's pretty awesome. It, like you said, it speaks without having to speak almost,
Yeah.
And I do want to add to something, another misconception folks might have is say like, hey, my family's from Afghanistan. We have a lot of families who have arrived in the past 4 years from Afghanistan. That English-Spanish program, that's not for my kids. Absolutely not. We have, and I was really proud to see this when I worked as a teacher in Oakland for 11 years. We had students from all over the world, many from Central and South America who are learning English and Spanish, but many from Yemen, from Vietnam, from Laos, who are learning a third language, and their brains are actually as, if not more, wired to learn language. So I think it's really cool because it also gives us the opportunity to welcome everyone. So
That's awesome.
I just wanted to add that in.
Great. That's great, man. That's awesome. Well, Danielle, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. I hope you come back on again.
I would love to come back. And as always, please don't hesitate to reach out. We here as a department are really excited to connect with families. I've had many families call me on the phone and say, hey, I'm either moving here or I live in this part of the city. What are my options? And we're more than happy to talk you through it and guide you and set up times for you to visit schools. But just know that we're here and that you'll hear a lot more from us in the coming years.
That's awesome. Well, great. Thank you again.
All right.
Daniel Pastrana, the Executive Director of the Bilingual Education for Santa Fe Public Schools. Got that right, brother.
You got it right.
Yeah, I can't even edit it at the beginning, right? Because
okay.
no one will get this, right? So, what are you talking about? You said it right the first time. So we're keeping it. Awesome. Thanks again, folks. And I want to thank you. I want to thank Nusenda Credit Union for being a sponsor here of the Inside Santa Fe Public Schools podcast. Folks, have a great week. Have a safe week. Adios.